All right. Good day, guys. Wherever you are listening from, we are, again, a little extra cozy today in the Miata as we head towards Tonetown. We have a guest with us today, none other than Danny Underwood. And Danny is a fellow Canadian. So you know the episode is going to be good, a little extra apologetic. We might even cover favorite flannel brands. I'm not too sure. But Danny, why don't you say hi and kind of tell us a little bit about where you work, what you do, and do you even play guitar, or are you what do you do in the music industry?
Yeah, sometimes I think I don't play guitar, and I just kind of like it's not even dabbling; it's just surfing the wave of electric noise. Yeah.
Yep. I'm there.
Yeah, Canadian. Wow. I actually think our story, the story of how we met, is kind of interesting, but maybe we'll save that for later. But yeah, I'm Danny. I'm a guitar player and synth dabbler. I love synthesizers and knobs and stuff like that. So that all came together. Mostly just like tinkering around at home and recording at home. I've been in bands, but I'm really more of a recording guy. I like that process, which is why I've been really heavy into like making films with myself, because that's sort of all kind of comes together, and doing it all myself is a big thing. 10 years of managing a music store broke my brain, so I quit that, and I'm now a marketing manager for Roland and Boss. So that's my day gig. That's what I do in the daytime, and it's a pretty wild ride. It's pretty wild working for a monolithic brand that is just celebrated the 50-year anniversary. So it's been an interesting trip. Yeah. So,
well, that was kind of my first question around that. Is Boss
happy
being
anniversary.
A company? Maybe some people haven't heard about Boss. It's a little company, Japanese base. Tell us, what do you think? Do you think Boss has a future in the music industry? What are we talking about? Do you think they can grow into being a quite a large company with influence across the world, or is there just no hope for it?
Man, if they could just get products in every music store in the world, I think they could make it.
They could maybe do it. Hey.
Yeah.
Just maybe. as a side, I'm curious for all of us. Do you guys remember your first ever Boss pedal? The first one you ever bought? Do you guys have any clue what? Yeah, I think mine might have been a TU2 as well.
Yeah, it was a tuner for sure.
It's probably like the most boring answer we could get, but I think it was probably a tuner. I think I also got a this would have been early 2000s. I remember working a summer job, and it paid quite well because I worked for a union at Coca-Cola, and it was like the worst job ever, but it paid really well, and I got to drink as much Coke as I wanted to on my shift. And I finished that, had all this money and no bills and no responsibilities because I lived at home. I was in high school, and this is what you do. Perfect. So I went to Long and McQuaid, a like Canadian. Mm-hmm. Would you say, Danny, like the equivalent of kind of Guitar Center for America is kind of Long and McQuaid for Canada? It's like iconic.
If Guitar Center, if Guitar Center was clean most of the time, that would be Long and McQuaid. Yeah.
See, I don't have any experience with Guitar Center, so this is new to me. But it's like it's the store across Canada. There's always a Long McQuaid in all major cities. And so I went to Long McQuaid with all of my summer money, and I just bought a bunch of Boss pedals. I had no idea what they did. I just bought them because I'm a guitar player. I need Boss pedals. I got a DD5, a CE2, a Metal Zone, of course. And then I think, an OD1 or something, somewhere the distortion. Then I got a couple other pedals from other brands. But I would just go home, turn them on, and flick knobs. And I was like, I didn't know what chorus did. I didn't know how to use a delay. I just was like, they make me sound different. That's kind of fun. And that's my first big memory of Boss pedals. Wow. And obviously I have now learned how to use them a little bit better. But can I ask, Danny, for you, how did you come to work at Boss/Roland? Is it okay if we just say Boss for the rest of the episode? Since
sure. Yeah. Roland.
Mostly applies.
Yeah.
A lot of people
don't know. A lot of people don't know that Roland and Boss are the same company. Like, I get that all the time, which it's just funny. Yeah, guitar players. Yeah.
I actually bought for Goodwood. We did a Kickstarter in like 2015 for the interfacer, and we ended up funding that Kickstarter. And with that money, we bought ourselves a Roland engraver to engrave all of our guitar pedals.
Oh my gosh!
And
wow, yeah.
that was like a bit of a trip for me as well. I was like, oh, I have Boss pedals on my board. I have a Roland engraver right over here on the shelf, and from the same company, different divisions maybe, but same company.
Yep.
And so, how'd you come to work at Boss? Was this just a dream job? It finally happened. Did you stumble into it?
Honestly, it's like the laziest story in the world. So I worked at Analogman Quaid as well. I ended up being the manager of the store in White Rock, which is like a really small store. And I was just bored, like once you become a manager of a Analogman Quaid, that unless you're willing to move to their head office in Toronto, there's not really any opportunities there. And I really, something broke inside me 5-6 years ago where I was like, if I'm not constantly growing, learning, I'm really unhappy. So I'm a lot more tense than I usually have been in my life because I'm a really chill guy. So I was kind of unhappy and kind of stagnating, and I literally was dropping pins that were just close to my apartment at the time. I was just like, where could I work that's like within 10-minute walk of my apartment or 10-minute drive? And Roland has an office at the time around 10-minute walk from where our apartment was. And I was like, oh, well, I know most of those guys from being manufacturer reps coming through the store and whatever. So I just sent them an email saying, hey, if you're looking for anybody, let me know. And a year later, the CEO at the time was like, hey, are you still looking for a job? And they just put me in. I took a downgraded position in inside sales just to get my foot in the door. And then they realize that I'm not an idiot. And I guess that's how I'm managing the marketing department in North America, which is weird to say.
Is that what you put on your resume at the very top? Just not an idiot?
Yeah.
And that kind of got you in the door there. Yeah.
Totally. Well, it was funny because, and I say this all the time. They're like, the question was, what do you want to do at Roland & Boss? And I said, all I want to do is talk about gear that I love and sharing that enthusiasm with people. And it sounds like a cheesy thing to say in an interview, but he was like, and then that was it. Yeah.
So now everyone listening has an inside track on how to get a job at Roland.
Yeah. Just walk there. Just walk in and be like, hey, can you hire me, please? Yeah.
I don't want to totally dominate this interview. Brian and Mason, do you guys have any questions? I've got my whole list here. I could go all day, but I don't want to be that guy.
I was so with being part of the marketing, the team and stuff with like the IR2 that came out. I have a lot of people that I've been putting on. I have one too over here sitting in my demo tray, and I'm curious from like the marketing side. Have you guys seen a lot of sales with that new pedal? Because I think it's awesome. It sounds really great. I was really surprised by like how nice the USB-C connection interface stuff was. So I'm curious, like, have you guys seen a lot of uptick in sales for that?
Yes. I think we're back ordered to high heaven on those.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But I mean, we're like, so the way the development process works for Boss is, we have certain stages of it. So the engineers will show us it, get our thoughts and stuff like that. And to our detriment, we constantly underappreciate how iconic the Boss compact pedal is. Like, we get really technical when we look at it and we're like, yep, it does this and this, cool. But as soon as you put it in a compact pedal, it's an immediate, just like visceral reaction to people that they just want it. It's such an impactful design in music history, right? So IR2, we certainly thought it was going to be a banger, but and then the other thing that Boss is really good at is cramming a lot of value inside of something, right? So that, combined with the fact that it seems like the industry was really crying out for a really, really good solution that wasn't crazy amounts of money and very simple as well. Like, we're really careful to make sure that the compact series of pedals are simple. Like, you shouldn't need a manual to operate a compact pedal, right? So IR2 kind of fit that bill.
Yeah.
If someone just wants to dive in, right?
Can you tell us where the IR2 was headed? This is something me and you have chatted about privately, but where the IR2 was headed and where you stepped in and like, guys, you're missing something here. Like, we need to chat about this. Can you tell us a little bit about that story? And I think this is really good, which I was mentioning before the podcast. I think this is great. Oh, nice. We got a cat.
We got a cat.
Danny, I'm going to lose a lot of people. This talking about tangents. I'm going to lose a lot of people here. I'm a cat person, and I like cats. I also like dogs. I'm not a dog hater, but I love cats, man. And this is why they come up, they give you a nice little snuggle, and then you're good to go.
Yeah,
that's a total side. And now that we've lost 10,000 listeners, we'll continue on. So tell us about the IR2, and really briefly, we haven't actually said this yet, what the IR2 actually does. Like, that's the model number, but what does it actually do, and where was your involvement in this kind of area?
And what was the IR1?
Yeah, what was?
Or the IR0?
Well, a lot of people ask us that about why do we always skip one, right? Like, a lot of pedals start at 2, right? But basically the idea is the one pedals are always like the sacred first timers. They're always first innovators. So like you have like the SY1, which is the synthesizer pedal. That's the first time anybody's really done a pedal like that. And they were like, this is special enough to be a 1. But IR2 is a cabinet amp and cabinet pedal. Straightforward, just it replaces your amp, right? And we have had products before. The IR200 is kind of like the big brother of that. Which is the one with the screen presets and stuff like that. But I mean, Boss. A lot of people are kind of the way Boss develops things is kind of shrouded in mystery, which I love. Which I think it makes for a good story. But it's just normal, like it's normal engineers engineering products that they want to buy, right? It's not really to the point where we're designing products for price points and stuff like that. It's really truly they want to design something that people will love. And IR2 is no different. We wanted to make something that it was affordable, accessible, and sounds great, right? So my claim to fame, which I'm very, very proud of this, is we got shown, I don't remember at what point of the development was, but they showed us the mock-up of it. It looked like a gray compact pedal. And I was like, like put my hand up in the meeting or whatever. I can't remember how it came about, but I was like, what does the button do? And they're like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, what does the main stomp button do on the pedal if it's an amp and cab sim? And they're like, oh, it turns it off. And I'm a very, very, very knuckle dragging like style of guitar player. I got brought up on like punk bands and stuff like that, and I play really aggressively, and a lot of times I sing when I play. So I was like, oh dude, I'm gonna smash that button so hard on my pedal board, and it's just gonna be raw fuzz going to the PA. So it was sort of like this one of these things where they were like, well, what should it do? Like, and I was like, well, it can't turn it off so easily because those big Boss buttons are so easy to hit. So I suggested that we do like channel changing. So basically you press the button and it will automatically save the state of whatever the pedal is in. So you have a channel A and a channel B. And it turns out that's one of like the features that people were like, what? That's crazy. And I'm very proud of that. It's crazy. Like it was just like a weird suggestion that was like, how come it does, I don't want it to turn off by itself. I'm bad. Yeah. Just like mini pedals, right? Like I'm going to stomp on all over those, right?
Yeah. I love that.
You're the channel changer.
But with the IR2, you can turn it off. You just have to hold it down, right? So you can't accidentally, like you're going to have to turn it off on purpose. And for those people listening that have never turned off an amp sim when you're running straight to a PA, Danny alluded to it. It sounds like a can of bees. It sounds terrible and thin and harsh, and all the clipping that you don't want to happen is happening when you turn off an amp and cab sim going to a PA. So you don't want to do that by accident because everyone will know very quickly that you are the guy.
Yeah. It's an aesthetic. Yeah.
That's cool. That's very cool. I have to be honest, guys. I have yet to play the IR2, although I have not heard. It's come up in many conversations, many emails with people. I've not heard anyone say anything bad about it. It's always been talked about very positively. And I think, and I'd be curious on your take on this, Danny, but us as guitar players, human beings, we see an amp and cab sim for, what is the IR2 roughly price point? Where's that at?
$199.
$200? $200 US?
Yeah.
So we see something for $200 and then we see something from a competitor for $400. You don't even need to play it to know that inside of you, the $400 one is better. That's how it goes. That's how we perceive, prices and value things. And the IR2, again, I haven't played it myself yet, but the IR2, from everything I've heard from people, holds its own. And it does a really good job. It's compact, like you said. And I don't know. I'd be curious. You play a ton of gear, especially on your personal YouTube channel, which we'll chat a little bit about later. But I know you're probably a little bit biased on the IR2, but with amp and cab sims, kind of how are you feeling about it versus what are some of your other favorites at the moment with amp and cab sim and where do these kind of stack up?
Right. I mean, it's a rabbit hole that I've been down for a very, very long time. I'm sure most of us have been down this hole for ages, but I've had iPad rigs that were simulating amplifiers and stuff like that. And there's so many great products on the market these days. I think the reason the IR2 can sound better is because there are so many less options, right? I think I suffer personally from option paralysis quite easily. I mean, I have a chorus pedal that I've set it. I literally have set it, and I've never changed the knobs ever. I'm like
you found your chorus sound, and that's it.
That's it. Got it. Right. Yep. So I think I'm very susceptible to option paralysis. So when you start having lots of screens on your pedal board and stuff like that, I think I can get it a little bit this isn't rock and roll. I don't want to do this. Right. I think simplicity is really nice. It has the same knobs as an amplifier, which is really good. And you can just focus on just finding something you want and go. But that being said, we had an artist reach out to us being like, hey man, I want one of these IR2s. And Brian, him, Aaron Marino, very good friend of mine. He's the boss. He's one of the boss guys in the US. He was like, dude, you have an IR200. Why? He's like, it's literally like the better product in every way. He's like, what? Is it? It's just kind of a funny thing. People see the compact and it's such a visceral reaction to seeing that compact. They're like, I gotta have that. But there is a big brother model that is around that $400 price point that does a lot more, right? So people are funny. It's a really funny thing.
We've talked about this before on the podcast that the things, I think this might be, I'm going to butcher this, but I think Mason, this is something you said at one point, that the things to survive the apocalypse are going to be cockroaches and Boss compact pedals. They are indestructible. They are unbelievably tough, long lasting. There's just really not much to improve upon them. They're just such a great size. I don't know how they came about or if you know any of that history or backstory, Danny, but I don't know if there is a better enclosure design out there than the Boss Compact.
I mean, historically, it's kind of an interesting thing. And I think other people on the YouTubes have covered the history of Boss and stuff like that. And
totally.
One of the things that I think is kind of funny is that it did break the industry at that point. Right? 1977, you're looking at, big box electro-harmonics, those style of products. And then all these manufacturers like MXR and us started to come in and really change the industry. They put a lot of iconic companies in jeopardy because of the way we manufactured things. And I often talk about it in the same vein as like a Strat. It's weirdly cocky that they just nailed it and then they never changed the design for the rest of time.
70 years later.
the engineers aren't over in Japan being like, man, how can we improve this box design? What can we do? I mean, I think they added like a rubber strip on it recently to keep the noise down when you clicked it. But other than that, I don't think they've changed anything except for the rubber on the bottom. They've changed the rubber so that you can actually put Velcro on it now. So,
oh, nice.
yeah.
I didn't know
That's
that.
good.
yeah.
And
But
I
yeah,
think
it's just this funny thing. Like, yeah, they had an idea and they ran with it, and now we have one of the most iconic things in the world, I think. Not that I'm biased. I guess I have to.
oh, of course not.
Hashtag biased. Yeah.
It's if I'm hearing you correct, then Boss and MXR were the first mini pedals.
They were. Yeah.
Yeah.
Relative to what was out there, they definitely
Correct.
were.
No
Although
longer
I
mini.
guess they're not technically pedals, but those like Dana Armstrong modules are pretty small.
Oh,
That would
right.
be-
Yeah.
You'd put in onto your guitar, like the jack on your guitar, and then your cable would feed from that module into your pedal board or your amp. But they had no like foot switch or anything like that. It wouldn't live on your pedal board.
Right.
I do actually want to get into the mini pedal thing and some trends that maybe rub you the wrong way, Danny. Before we get there, though, I want to throw it to Mason, and Mason's going to tell us about a couple of the sponsors that make this podcast possible.
Thank you, Grant. And thank you again, Danny, for being here. I wanted to speak to you about the Guitar Sanctuary, Texas's premier guitar store. Whether you're looking for pedals, amps, or guitars at multiple price points, our friends over at the Guitar Sanctuary have them, including some of the Boss pedals that we may speak of today. Head over to theguitarsanctuary.com, check out what they have to offer, or go and visit them in person in McKinney, Texas. You may very well see the great Andy Timmons there, who is often a patron of the store. Great shop, great products. Go over there and check them out. Secondly, our friends over at Neural DSP are offering our listeners a special code to get 30% off. I'll say that again, 30% off any plugin available on their website at neuraldsp.com. This will not apply to anything that is new for the first 90 days, but then following that is then available to all customers. And the really cool thing about any of you who have purchased plugins from Neural before or plan to purchase some is that the update that is coming soon to the Quad Cortex will allow you to migrate any of your pre-existing plugins for amplifiers onto your Quad Cortex, just giving you even more flexibility. Also, I should mention, you now have the ability to edit your Quad Cortex on your computer. And this is something that had formerly not been something that you could do. This is a great way to just improve the workflow, allow you to be able to manipulate all the parameters right there on your desktop or laptop. A really, really great feature. So head over to neuraldsp.com, use the coupon code Chairmen, get 30% off, whether you're looking for the new Morgan Amp Suite, Soldano SLO, the Corey Wong package of clean DIs, clean machines, all sorts of Dumble-inspired clean stuff. Really, really great, wonderful plugins. Go check them out.
Love it.
Back to you, Grant.
So,
Wow.
Danny, you have done and continue to do some very quirky and fun to watch videos on YouTube, like
Oh, no.
gear related, like right down, basically, if you're listening to the podcast, it's kind of, and play guitar, it's kind of in your vein. And I love it because it's not the typical gear review. Like, it's entertaining, it's fun to watch, which I know you do very much on purpose, but it's a really good time. But you recently did a video, and I might get the name wrong here, but it's something to the effect of 5 pedal trends that drive you crazy, or 5 something like that. Am I getting anywhere in the neighborhood?
So the YouTube thing is you have to have a bit of a face on the thumbnail, but also you have to capitalize words in the title. So it's
course.
the 5 worst pedal trends.
my
You gotta
bad.
capture that click.
Clickbait.
right?
See,
Yeah.
and this is why I'm failing right now. Is I need to capitalize.
You need a better YouTube
Thank you
face.
for that.
Yeah.
I type everything in all caps, so it seems like I'm yelling all the time. It's super easy.
It
perfect.
is one thing whenever I interface with you, Brian, via text, sometimes even
Always.
on the phone. It's like, why is this guy yelling at me
All
all the
caps.
time?
All
What have I
caps.
done? And so you did the 5 worst pedal trends, and there was quite a bit of overlap, which made me pretty happy. There's quite a bit of overlap with what we have chatted about, whether it be on Chairman of the Boards or on our individual channels. Like, it seems like a lot of the things that would drive me or us crazy on the show also kind of frustrate you as well. Do you want to go through, like, firstly, is the video resonating with people? And can you capitalize? Why don't we chat a little bit about what your take on the 5 worst pedal trends of all time are, and we can just kind of support each other through this one trend at a time. Let's offer some support to each other and the listeners here.
Wow, this is a very safe space. I
I really hope it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Grant, you've met me in person. I'm not a negative guy. I'm really positive, and I think this is my Canadianness, like, leaking out of me. I'm not here to make enemies.
Yep.
But it stemmed from a conversation I was having on Instagram with, like, a little group text with a few other content creators. And I think it was Pedalboard of the Days, Andy's idea. He's like, man, you should do, like, worst trends. He's like, ugh. And I was like, well, what would the worst trends be? And I wanted to always obviously come from it from, like, a positive angle. But some of them do grind my gears. Oh my gosh. Like, mini pedals. What are we doing here? Like, what's happening here?
Why would you say minis?
Wrong.
Why would you say minis? What is it about them that drives you crazy?
So with minis, I don't think I have as strong of an opinion of mini pedals, but I think a lot of times I'm a huge UI guy. I truly think that, like, UI is why we love individual pedals over multi effects and stuff like that. Like, it's the user interface is such an important thing, and when you start to miniaturize things, you have to lose functionality and you have to suffer the user interface of the pedal. And man, I stomp all over those things, those mini pedals. But it was just a funny, like, I knew that being the first one would set a lot of people off. And I think there's a lot of things that stem from that. Like, there was a lot of comments that were like, oh, I buy I love my EP booster from Exotic Effects and he's like, because it's mini, I can leave it on all the time. And I'm just, like, holding my tongue because I'm like, man, pedals you leave on all the time are also one of those trends that I'm just like, like if you need to leave this pedal all the time, maybe you should relook your amp or something like that. If this little thing gives you the goods and whatever's missing, like, I'm a very, like, I think it was like a Tom Morello interview where he was talking about how every pedal on his pedal board, I want to be, like, as extreme as possible. I don't want, like, subtle things on my pedal board.
And now you're offending people.
That really resonated with me. Yeah, it really resonated with me. Even though Tom Morello, bless his heart, like, he has a very specific style. It resonated with me. Like, he's like, oh, he always, like, parrots the same story of how they got the record contract and they went to Guitar Center. They bought the craziest guitar effects possible. And he's like, that's my rig forever. So I was kind of like, oh yeah, like, I kind of resonate with that. Like, every pedal on the pedal board should make an appreciable difference. So that was kind of like, I was kind of biting my tongue on that one. I was like, mini pedals you leave on all the time. I
think this is where I'm not going to disagree with you.
Oh,
but you would be frustrated at how I run my board. And the reason being, I do my best to where my skill set is currently at. I do my best to get a good sound between guitar and amp. And then I'll throw in something like a classic example, like an RC booster. I'll put that somewhere close to the beginning. And that, for me, I love the EQ on it. I love what it does. I run the gain very low, but for me, it's just like that 5% that I couldn't get out of my amp. I'll get from something like an RC booster or a Kingsley Squire preamp. Love those as well.
Local guy. Local.
What's that? Yeah, exactly. He's 15 minutes down the road.
Yeah.
Amazing company. And so I definitely have always on pedals on my board. And whenever I always I always think to myself, like, man, I should really just turn this thing off for a bit, you know? Cause like I feel this pressure to not have always on pedals on my board, whether it be maybe a yellow compressor from Diamond or RC booster or a preamp or something. And whenever I turn it off, like, man, that sounds flat. It just doesn't sound as good as when it's on. And so I could see personally, for certain mini pedals, like a Moore yellow comp, which is a copy of the Diamond comp. I remember playing the first time I played the Moore yellow comp, like, this thing sounds great. Like for a cheap, and air quotes, a cheap pedal, I could totally leave this on all the time and be really happy with it. But I think where I get frustrated with mini pedals is for me, the whole sales pitch, and we've chatted about this a bit before, is save space on your board. Like you can fit more effects on your board.
Right. Yeah.
And then when you try and use those effects, AKA like turning them on and off, it's like, I'm going for that one right in the middle, and I'm going to hit one on either side. I'm going to be hitting two pedals no matter what I try, or I'm going to be that guy that's like daintily trying to curve his toe down and get it at just the right angle so I can, while I'm trying to play guitar. Exactly. I need some pointy boots or something like that. But yeah, I definitely, I'm sorry to say, Danny, I don't know if, again, you may walk out of the room. I am an always on pedal guy for as little as possible, but I do have pedals. I turn them off and I'm not happy.
I get it. I get it, man. I get it. And you probably turn all those pedals sideways too, right? Yeah.
Just my tuner.
Oh my gosh. No. No.
My tuner and my volume. Those are the two that go sideways on my board.
Yeah.
If you could get any more awkward with those things.
So when you have like an E, it looks like a W. Like, oh yeah, this is my W
my
string.
Flat. Shoot.
The low W and the high W need to be in tune.
Yeah, but I just can't do the sideways pedal thing. It hurts. It hurts. My poor little brain.
Even if you could get a smaller board by putting a pedal sideways, you wouldn't do it.
I can't do
that's
it.
the line in the sand.
Yeah, I can't. I'm a very aesthetically driven person, and I'm free to admit that. I think the most important factor of buying a guitar is aesthetics. 100%. I will die on that hill. So when I see a sideways pedal, I'm just like, oh no.
I got one for you.
Lord,
I'm going to challenge this. Are you familiar with the Benson preamp? I was doing a layout yesterday for someone.
No.
The Benson preamp is a 1590B enclosure. So it's like a JHS double barrel, but it has 1 foot switch off in one corner, 4 knobs off on the other side of the pedal. I was doing a layout yesterday for someone and I put it sideways and the whole layout came together. But that pedal sideways kind of looks, other than the writing, the direction of the writing, kind of looks like other pedals that are in their proper vertical position. Does that bug you as well?
I mean, I have the preamp. It's a wonderful pedal. It doesn't, I put it right side up because it doesn't matter if I kick the knobs. It seems to always just sound the same. It's very, very subtle in the terms of the way the EQ works.
Fair enough.
It's just like one of the things I cut on that mini pedal spiel I did was, I at one point at the very end of that spiel of mini pedals, I held up a Zvex Fuzz Factory.
Yep.
Okay.
And I was like, and this is, I don't know if we're swearing on this channel, but I was like, in this, and I hold up the Zvex Fuzz Factory, and I was like, and this is something that I would complain about, but it's actually better that you kick the knobs on a Fuzz Factory because that's half the fun. Like breaking the pedal and making it sound like a zipper is half the fun of owning that pedal. So I can understand why Zachary did that. So you accidentally kick those knobs and make.
But how does he explain the SHO and the Sequoia and Seek Trem? It's the same layout as that, and those might be less susceptible to just crazy sounds.
Yeah.
Or the box of rock, even. The box of rock is really hard to deal with because it's also horizontal and it's 2 foot switches.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah. He's
challenging you.
The trials and tribulations
you gotta be
of a
precise.
guitar player.
So does the KTR bug you with how the orientation is?
I don't remember that one. Which one's that one?
So it's the same
Klon
enclosure as the
KTR.
Benson, the Klon, the KTR, the red one,
Right.
that one. Yeah. So how that orientation is, like, I have people that like they'll turn it sideways, and so you can get the foot switch. I'm like, but if you turn it vertically, then you don't have to worry about hitting the knobs. And they're like, no, it's fine. I was like, but you have a switcher, so it doesn't really matter what the orientation is. And like, nah, it's a brain thing. I have to have it this direction. Has to be 45 degrees south of the whatever. It's so
Right.
yeah. Does that ever bug you?
I mean, I don't even think I've seen one in person, so I haven't had the chance to be bugged. Actually, that's not true. A friend of mine brought over a good friend of mine is not super into the pedal scene, and he was like, he brought it. He's like, you gotta hear this pedal, and he's like, he brought over a bunch of pedals that he just bought. And he's like, this one sounds really good, huh? And it was a KTR. I was like, well,
Yeah.
get on the internet, bro. Like, come on. Like, this is a big deal.
Did you adjust the little toggle switch where it says almost always better, almost always worse?
That's a buffer, right? Isn't that what's in it? Is that
think
what
that's
that
what it
switch is doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The funny thing though is that, and maybe it gives it a description of it in the manual, but almost everybody that I've ever seen tests it with the pedal on. So it's already in its
placebo.
buffered state. And so there's no they're not hearing the difference because
what
the
you need
pedal
to
is
do,
already
Mason.
on. And people are
next
like,
April
I've heard
Fools.
people do it and they're like, oh yeah, always better, for sure, always better, and I'm just looking at these guys like they have no idea. They have no
The
idea.
next April 1st, Mason, you need to do a deadpan video of that switch with the pedal on and talk about the tonal benefits of the different positions. That would be that'd just be it.
Mm-hmm.
Guys,
Yeah.
listen, side note. So speaking of the KTR April Fool's edition, I did an April Fool's last year where I photoshopped a KTR to like a teal color, like enclosure, because they only come in red. I kid you not. I had over 1 million views on this one stupid 5-second Instagram reel, and like people are flooding my inbox. Can I buy it? Can I buy it? I let that sucker go for a week. I did not touch it. And then I finally responded back with, please check the post date. And they're like, oh, I hate you. I think I lost and gained a lot of followers that day. But it was just the funniest thing how people are also over color stuff. They're like, I have to have that color. My coworker at the guitar shop, he was not very happy with me because he likes teal color stuff. So yeah, that was a fun little tidbit.
Oh, that's amazing.
There's
Wow.
a few pedals you could probably pull that off with, but that's good, man. I had no idea you did that. That's smart.
Oh yeah. It took a long time to
Talk about
Photoshop.
clickbait. Yeah.
Yeah, winning the internet. You did it. Yeah.
What were some of the other top trends you hated, or the worst? Sorry, I don't want to use the word hated
The worst.
frivolously here, but what were some of the other pedal trends on the video that drive you crazy?
I mean, certainly the one I think that struck the biggest chord as far as the comments go. And again, back to like UI, trim pots and dip switches inside of pedals that are major features, right? And I blasted the Cattle and Bread Dirty Little Secret because it's one of my favorite overdrive pedals of all time. But the presence control is inside the pedal, along with the switch that switches between the super lead and the super bass mode. And it's always like made me crazy because I'm a chronic amp switcher. I use the basically amps live different parts of my life, and I bring my pedal board to the amp, right? So if you're plugging into a Princeton or plugging into a Hiwatt or something like that, you need to control that presence control. And it always made me crazy. So I externalized it, and I showed people on the video like, oh, you just externalize it that way. But I definitely struck a chord with people. And I think it's indicative of like the way our industry is that manufacturers are really kind of, I don't want to say struggling for ideas, but certainly we've plateaued in certain areas of the industry, and manufacturers are trying to add features, but also you add too many features and people are like, hey, I didn't want to buy a Boss multi-effect. What is this? Like, so I think it kind of was an interesting way to gather some feedback on the way people feel about internalized functions, right?
I'd be curious, Mason, on your thoughts on this, but I know for me, like with us, we only do junction boxes. We don't do any effects. And for me, if people want everything, they want the kitchen sink. And then I follow up, I'm like, how's it going? How's this feature? Like, how's it? I was like, oh, I haven't touched it. Like, everyone wants everything until it's on their board and they use like one or two things. And I'm curious, Danny and Mason, from your point of view, like how you guys find that balance of I want this to be feature packed right up until the point until it's, useful and people will actually use what I put in. But if I pare back the features to what I know people will mainly use, they're going to say I'm crippling the product and just trying to, get it down to certain price points. And that's why I took this out and that. And so I'm curious how you guys do that with your products. Like Mason, you do a whole range of obviously effects and stuff. How do you guys decide what goes in and what makes the cut and what doesn't as far as a feature list goes?
On our small size enclosures, this is the smallest that we make, the Vertex Boost, and I just know that the threshold for this is 6 knobs. I know that we can't fit any more than that. And so I try to limit, and we could actually do 2 foot switches. Like we have a design right now where it's got 6 knobs, and then these foot switches are basically spread out as far as they can be physically on the circuit board and still fit in the enclosure. And we just know that that's the max that we can accommodate. And we know on the backs, the max that we can accommodate is 2 jacks and an 1/8 inch, which you see is already drilled in this one. And so, we know for this size, these are our limitations. And in some ways it can be liberating, in the same way that the Boss compact size, like they know that parameter. And so when they're designing, there's not a consideration for other things that are beyond the scope of what the mechanical size of the pedal is. So I kind of operate with that in mind. I know that these are the limitations, and I don't usually do hidden features. I think that like on our very first boost, the Mark 1, there was a dip switch inside that wasn't really, it was a hidden feature, but it wasn't something that would ever be manipulated in real time. It was basically like, do you want the expression or volume pedal to be always on, or do you only want it to come on when the boost is engaged? And that wouldn't be something that somebody would manipulate on the fly or based on the amp that they had. Like that would generally be like a baked in thing that somebody would want it, they'd want chocolate or they'd want vanilla,
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I would approach stuff that needed to be adjusted internally, because I'm of a mind similar to what Danny has said, where it can be really frustrating if there's a variable that needs to be manipulated for your context and you're having to open it up or whatever it is to have it to be adjusted. So I don't typically like that. I mean, like the King of Tone, I think, is a good example as well, where it's got a lot of dip switches in it that do drastically alter the tone. And as somebody currently with that pedal, I'm struggling to like it, especially with both channel. I mean, like I feel like I need both channels on in order to get enough gain where it really feels like it's a real overdrive. But to do the A/B testing, it's difficult to have it connected, to have it flipped upside down, to not disrupt the knobs too much, to be able to like that would be to me much better if he went Chase Bliss, or something like that. I was just going to mention
Chase Bliss. Yeah. All the dip switches outside of the pedal.
But I can understand too, that's not his, he's analog man. He disables his microwave clock and the digital clock on his oven, like he's not going to do that.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going to be honest. I don't know if that is just a hidden thing that you know about him, or if you're being facetious. But either way, I mean, Analog Man.
I don't know. I just think it would be cool if that were the story, like on his Wikipedia page, like all throughout his house. He's just like,
he's got those flip clocks everywhere.
Yeah, like on his and his car. He disables the digital clock.
That's funny. Yeah. I mean, he's been very vocal about Boss switching to surface mount for sure. I know that
he doesn't like it.
I mean, it's really hard, and I would never throw shade towards him because I think part of the reason Boss has had the staying power is because he has, created an industry of modding Boss pedals. I mean,
that would be why he doesn't like it. It's way harder for him to now make changes to them on surface mount.
Yeah, so when he he's pretty vocal about like, don't send me surface mount ones. You can't do them anymore. And I don't know if he's actually said they're inferior or not, but it's sort of like, man, like, I'm sorry, like your business, like this is super biased. The way you're saying this is really tough. Like,
welcome to the internet, right?
You can't charge people to mod pedals anymore. I'm so sorry, right? But.
Well, I think it's 100% driven by that, because it is still possible to modify Boss pedals with surface mount. I mean, like all of our pedals, for the most part, I'd say 90% of them are surface mount, and the only places where they're not is like in critical places where there isn't an equal, or there just isn't a product for that in surface mount. But it's totally possible to mod, and there are people that still do it. I think it's just like he probably had fixtures for the way that they did their through hole stuff, right. And they're like, we don't want to start from ground zero again. It's hard work. But I mean, I would say we've had this conversation a lot on this podcast about, there are a lot of people out there that have been influenced potentially by, I'm not saying that Analogman said this, I don't know if he said this, but have kind of shot down the idea that surface mount is a quality alternative, and it's just not true. Like I would say that pedals now that are surface mount, and most of the big brands are way more consistent than they've ever been, because it's a way tighter tolerance. It's a lower noise if done properly. And the bad examples are examples of bad engineering. It has nothing to do with the surface mount components themselves. Like you can make a bad pedal or transition something from through hole to surface mount poorly, and people will have the impression that the X factor was the surface mount and not the designer. And I can tell you that it is not anything to do with the surface mount. It's 100% the issue would be an engineering issue.
That's really interesting. Yeah. I mean, Boss kind of gets a lot of that flack with switching over a lot of our legacy products to surface mount. And it's just like one of those marketing problems where it's very it's very difficult to articulate to the lowest common denominator why you did a thing like that. That like someone who's like, I don't know anything about building pedals, but all I know is surface mount's worse. And like talking to that customer and being like, no, actually the concern is that the workforce where Boss pedals are made, they don't get really trained in through hole anymore. Like it's such an advanced manufacturing process in Malaysia or China or wherever products are made now, right? Like the workforce is not necessarily trained on that type of technology, right? It's old. It was like when I wanted to go to electrical engineering school and I was talking to like the intake guy, and I was like, he's like, oh, how come you want to do electrical engineering? I was like, oh, I want to learn how to build tube amps. And he's like, well, that's like day 2 for 30 minutes, and then we're moving on. Like, it's like, no. Yeah.
You need an electrical engineering course from like the 60s, right?
Yeah. I need the what is the books? There was like a Keith kit. Is that what it was? I can't remember what it. Yeah. But it's an interesting conversation for sure. The surface mount versus through hole. I get it. I think my rebuttal to people, and I have and many people at Boss have so much respect for people who modded Boss pedals. Like we love Josh Scott. Like Josh Scott's a bud to us. But my rebuttal always is that if you're down the rabbit hole of wanting to mod a Boss pedal, nowadays it's not really that much of a stretch to get some PCBs from someone and just build the pedal from scratch. Like it's not that much of a step. And then you can get into the whole process and kind of learn a lot, right? But no one listens to me.
Last thing on good. Sorry, you go, Mason. I cut you off.
No, I think that the idea of modding pedals now, it's interesting. I don't know that I considered that 20 years ago, when this really became fashionable, with the Robert Keeleys and the Analogmans of the world, that there was a lot less infrastructure for DIY, and now there's a ton. And there are easy ways to get into it, whether you're doing the build your own clone or whether you're doing I forget what it's called, something guitar gadgets. It's like 3Gs.
Right.
They have kits. Stuart McDonald has kits that are like, curated by Josh Scott at JHS. So there's so many more resources now where you can start to get proficiency. Because when I started learning how to do pedals, a lot of it was doing mods and repairs to Boss pedals, Ibanez pedals, and stuff like that, because those are sort of the easiest to make changes to, and those circuits, were very well known. It was easy to find information about them without having to be a registered service technician where you could get schematics, because it wasn't as easy to get schematics in the late 90s, early 2000s for stuff, unless you were a repair center. And so this stuff was really easy. Again, all surface mounts, so super easy to get into if you didn't have any experience before. And it would be considerably harder now with surface mount for sure.
I want to chat about the favorite Boss pedals, especially from you, Danny, who a lot more probably about the history, what's come and gone, and all that. And maybe even, I'm just going to throw this out there, maybe even a little bit about what's to come. I don't know what you can or can't share, but I'm hopeful.
Oh wow.
Although I'm prepared to be disappointed. Before we get there, though, I want to throw it over to Brian, and Brian's going to tell us about the last couple of sponsors that help make this conversation and future ones actually happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we're so grateful for our sponsors and everyone that's involved, and we're especially grateful for the guys over at Mono Creators. Monocreators.com. They have a discount code. It's CHAIRMEN for 10% off. We talk about them all the time, about the plethora of gig bags and soft cases and pedal boards and everything you can think of. They have, from their new thinner stripped power supply units to their rail system boards, carbon fiber boards. They just have so much great stuff. I have multiple backpacks that I use of their stuff, and I've had them for years. So go check them out. Save 10% at monocreators.com with that discount code Chairmen. And then I always say they're simply the best because they are. I literally just got an email from Brad this morning of an order of some MIDI connectors I needed. So it's the guys over at Bestronix or btpa.com. They have a code DACHAIRS, DACHARS, for 10% off as well. So go check them out. They have MIDI connectors, cables, square plugs, DC 2.1 millimeters, looms. They have everything. They build. If you've ever been on their social media, they build hundreds. It seems like hundreds. I could be wrong. Hundreds of quad cortex redundancy racks. So they got all the gear. They got all the stuff to do it. Go check them out. You won't be disappointed and save a little money.
Love it. Thank you. Yeah, it's nice, the weekly chat with Brad. Hey, you always asking nice. Brad what you got, what part number do you have for me, and he always delivers. He's like,
I have a quick question. I'm noticing Danny's shirt here. Is it saying "No Huey, no news"?
No Huey, no news, no thanks. It's a very old Instagram meme shirt.
Love it.
Love that.
I love Huey Lewis in the news. What can I say? Yeah.
Power of love.
Yep. Great guitar tones, and I can't remember the guitar player's name.
Chris Hayes.
Chris Hayes, his name. Right.
And if anybody knows Chris Hayes, or Chris Hayes, if you're listening to this, I want to interview you for the guitarist behind. So if anybody can connect me with Chris Hayes, I know his brother Kevin, who's the drummer who plays with Matt Schofield and Robert Cray, but I don't know Chris. So
maybe you need to order one of those shirts, and then on the notes section on checkout, it's like, "Hey, Chris, if you're packing this order, would love to have a chat and see if that works." So, speaking of guitar tones, we're obviously most of the people listening are going to be either playing electric, acoustic, or bass. And Boss has, they've been doing their thing for, before any of us were born. And hopefully long after we're all gone, Boss will still be going strong in the industry. They have put out so many pedals, so many iconic sounds that, other companies, whether you know it or not, have, taken those schematics, those ideas, and done their own take on Boss pedals. But Danny, out of everything Boss has put out, what are some of the staples that live on your board or you frequently come back to? What are your maybe top 3 best of Boss pedals from the ages? Do you have anything that kind of comes to mind, or are you just like, nah, I'm not a Boss guy?
Wow, yeah. I mean, one thing that came to mind when you were saying that is that you don't realize how many products Boss releases until you work for them.
Yeah, I believe
and then
that.
You're like, oh God, what have I done? Yeah. Because they hit a lot of different industries. Like we make mixers, we make everything. So there's always something coming out. But to me, the staples of Boss. I mean, I always joke about how the Tube Screamer is a clone of the OD1, which you could argue that is very, 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 very similar of a circuit, even though the circuit is fairly straightforward. So you got your SD1s and your DS1s. I think DS1, I wouldn't put it as one of my true favorites. I'm a BD2 man. I love the Blues Driver. I think the Blues Driver is like the unsung hero of Boss in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Like it proved that Boss was listening, which before it seemed like Boss was like just like one of the things that's interesting about Roland and Boss is that the slogan is "We design the future." And if you want to design products that are the future, you have to look past what people are asking for and what you think people want, right? So the design process for Boss and Roland had been very closed off for very, very many years of guys kind of like toiling away and trying to figure out what do people want, what do people not know they want, right?
Yep.
The Blues Driver was an answer to the boom of blues rock and stuff like that in the early 90s, like the Joe Bonamassas and stuff like that. And I think the Blues Driver is like the unsung hero.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, we've made millions of them, and you can't fault the Metal Zone for anything at all. I unironically love the Metal Zone. I think
that's a good way to put it. Unironically love it.
Yeah.
Do you run it dimed in all of its clipping kind of craziness, or do you run the Metal Zone? Because I owned it years ago before I knew how to dial in a pedal, and so in my mind, I don't think the Metal Zone is usable. Although I've seen videos on YouTube where people have done like blind tests, and a lot of the sounds I really liked was a Metal Zone, but I think it was the knob stack where there's multiple EQs on each knob.
Thing. Yeah.
That when I had even less of a clue than I do now, that really intimidated me. So I found it hard to dial in a sound. So tell us, for all of those listening, this is like the pedal. How do you pull a sound out of the Metal Zone that is not ironic? Like that is just, this is actually usable. What do you do? How do you approach it?
This is my time to shine, isn't it?
This is it, man. This is going to outshine the IR2.
Okay.
This is what your new legacy is.
Okay, so the reason that the Metal Zone is so misunderstood is because you're giving people a parametric EQ without explaining really like the implications of the Q control and everything like that, right? So my trick with the Metal Zone is to kill the treble as low as you can go and use the Q control as your treble control. So you move the Q to the higher frequencies and you boost the mid control is now basically like a high mid treble control, and you'll get some really good results.
And then from there you're just dialing in level and gain.
Yeah. And so my history with the Metal Zone is vast. That was my first pedal. And I bought it along McQuaid. And I didn't really know how to use it. And my first recording I ever did was a Metal Zone direct into the microphone input of my Dell computer.
No amp sim, nothing. Just
Nothing.
Metal Zone into DAW.
I have the recording too. I am happy to share that recording with you guys. It is good. It's really good. It was like a history project where I wrote a song that encapsulates the feelings of World War II, like the lead up and the conflict, and that's amazing. And it actually doesn't sound super bad, as bad as you'd think it would. A direct to Dell computer would sound, but and so I've always had that pedal in my collection, and every once in a while you plug it in for a laugh or whatever. But I was lucky enough to get to go see Biffy Clyro, which is a Scottish band. And it's like, man, this is the hugest sounding 3-piece I've heard in a long time. And that frickin' Simon Neil guy runs a vintage Strat into a Metal Zone, into a vintage Marshall. It's like the most, and it's a great live tone. It's so good. And I think there's like a deep dive from like that pedal show of those guys going through his rig and talking about how much he loves the freaking Metal Zone. And the tone of that guy's guitar is amazing. So it's just a matter of how you use it and what you're after.
Clapton also used the Metal Zone in the 80s.
Has it been around that long?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
We might be thinking of the heavy metal.
Maybe it was the heavy metal. Yeah.
The MT2 came out in 91, and then the heavy metal was before it.
Okay,
so
it must have been
the heavy metal.
Yeah. It must have been the heavy metal then. But I remember there was like a Boss overdrive or distortion that was like not particularly, wouldn't be considered sexy in today's world, but was like part of his rig back then. And I think David Gilmour too had a heavy metal.
Yep. Yeah. I'm a huge Gilmour head, and he used the heavy metal for like 1984 and up, I think. Was a
so there's
metal?
Precedent for the word metal as associated with Boss pedals
not being used by metal bands.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the heavy metal is basically like a big muff style pedal with a crazy EQ. It's a really weird, like it's like super sweepable EQ. And basically, like if you dime all the controls, which is what a lot of guys will argue is the only setting you're allowed to do on a heavy metal, there's actually quite a significant amount of signal boost that happens. So it's like overdriving the circuit. So it's quite a fascinating pedal that I don't understand, unfortunately.
This is making me want to go buy a Metal Zone just to see if I can now get a sound out of it. Because if I saw that rig you're just talking about, vintage Strat, Metal Zone, into a Marshall, I'm like, oh, he rehoused that. There's no way that's a real Metal Zone. Like my first thought would not be he's actually using a Metal Zone. But I need to change my opinion. I think obviously I am biased in the negative direction towards the Metal Zone. I don't think I've ever seen, and this is not that I've gone searching, I don't think I've ever seen someone use it without kind of, giving a little bit of a smirk out of the side of their mouth. But, obviously it has its place. And I think I need to go and buy one and actually spend some proper time with it into a tube amp and give it a fair shot.
Yeah.
And I'll let you know what I find.
I have a funny story about, actually, it's ironic that you're talking about this exact thing. I not made a joke. I wanted to see if people basically, don't judge a book by its cover kind of thing. I wanted to see if one of my friends would do that. So I grabbed the Metal Zone, and I think I grabbed some other distortion pedal for some other company or whatever, and I made it look like I had that company's pedal plugged in, but I really had the Metal Zone plugged in, and I was playing through it, and I was like, how does this sound? He's like, that sounds amazing. And he starts messing with it. He goes, why isn't the gain working? And I went, it's actually this one. I pulled out the Metal Zone, and he goes, Are you freaking kidding me? And I said, no, I wanted to do the test. So from there, him and I sat down in the room, and we just did this like, why, how? I'm like, you just got to tweak it. Like it's very funny that you guys are talking about that exact thing. I was like, yeah. He goes, I wouldn't have thought to do that. I was like, he's like, why do I want one now? I was like, I'm just saying, like it was such a funny story. It's ironic that you guys are now talking about.
Well, was it Danny? I know you know him. Is it William John Benetti? I think he has an Instagram handle, also Canadian guy. He did a video and it was just on Instagram, and it was just a quick one where he put, I think it was a Klon
Yeah,
on the
he borrowed a
screen.
friend's Klon. Yeah,
And then he's playing guitars like, man, this like sounds awesome. He's dialing up all these tones. And then he basically removes the Klons. Like, actually, you were just listening to a metal zone. And the comments below that as well, like same thing. And I think that's what we're really good at in this industry is listening with our eyes. And then we kind of, make our case for it later on. And then when the eyes are removed and you actually have to use your ears, a lot of these pedals, like ones that you would never consider to be good, actually sound amazing. Or you're tricked into thinking they sound amazing, without having the actual pedal in front of you. But it is interesting, like if you think about the money that we could all save if we just listened to a pedal for what it was, rather than making a quick, fast judgment on what we see. Our pedal boards would be probably arguably a little bit more boring, but they would sound just as good. And, we'd be getting great tones.
The amount of times I've considered putting that Digitech RP50 I've talked to you guys about.
Yep.
That
the $25 pedal.
I bought for $25 on Marketplace, and I dialed it in. 15 years ago, I had no idea what I was doing, and I thought it sounded great. But now I didn't realize how I was running it. But I was able to dial in sounds for it, and then yet again, I threw it on Instagram. People are like, that sounds so good. And, I do those little switch videos. So I like snap my fingers and the board disappears and it's just this RP50. People are like, that's the amp. That has to be just the reverb. I'm like, it's amp, cab, compression, boost, reverb, delay, everything's in it. And it was such it's I've considered multiple times putting it on my board just to see the comments of what people would say. Yeah.
Or let alone next time you play in church, just bring your RP50, plop it down on the stage.
Volume pedal.
I still do want to hear, though, if we can, Danny's top 5 Boss pedals, because I agree with the Blues Driver thing. And one thing that people don't realize, and I think I'm remembering this right because it's been a long time since I've worked on one, but I think it's 100% Class A. It's all discrete, which is unusual for most overdrives these days. And even when it was made at that time, there wasn't much out there that was, all Class A. So people maybe don't realize that about the BD2, which is pretty, I think, unique to what that is. And I would say it's not, obviously it's hard to create a differentiator in analog overdrive. There's only so many ways you can produce distortion. And so we invariably end up treading in places where there's already been some stuff done before. But I would say that is actually a pretty unique circuit. And even with the new Keeley stuff, I think the Muse driver or the MK3, it's that Blues Driver thing. And there's a special place in my heart for a 2 and 4 position on a Strat. There's probably no better overdrive than a Blues Driver. I think that's one of the best sounds for a 2 and 4 position, where you kind of lose some of that output and you maybe you get some quack, but you maybe lose some sheen, and that BD2 can kind of put it back for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Very well said. Yeah. Blues Driver, man. I did a video about maybe it's poorly named because it can work in a lot of situations, right? It might be the wrong name for that thing, right? But I mean, that's kind of the cool thing about Boss is that, they're a highly trained, skilled engineer team. So they're doing stuff. They're trying to do stuff a little bit differently. Like DM 101 is probably my newest top 5 of Boss. Is the analog delay machine we came out last year. I think it was last year. Time moves differently these days.
I think that sounds about right.
Yeah, last year. Yeah. Took years to make that thing not have it took years to make it sound perfect. Basically, they took a long time to develop that thing to make sure it was really well done. It was a game changer product, and they kind of nailed it. I really think that way.
They should do it with Chorus, though, where they really do a CE1, in that style enclosure.
Man, wow. No, I can't. I was gonna be all coy and funny, but no, I can't say anything at all. But yes, you're right. Absolutely.
They should.
Okay.
They should. No, don't read into that deep.
I'm not reading into it.
No. Yeah.
Wink.
Yeah. There's definitely not mock-ups on my computer that I scribbled myself. No. No.
No,
No,
okay,
not at
well,
all.
Mason hit on something there. Yeah, great. Okay.
Well, that enclosure resembles most closely that, kind of what the CE one was. And I don't mean to derail your top 5 list, but I do think the boost idea was really cool. Because I think like one thing that Boss as of late has been really good at is they look at the marketplace and maybe how it's adapted around a product, and then maybe incorporate some of those popular mods in, let's say, a Waza edition, like as it relates to the Blues driver, right? There's been a lot of different modifications that have gone on with that circuit. The Waza craft incorporates not only the essence of the original, but then maybe some of the derivatives or things that people liked about some of the common mods out there. Equally, there was a ton of people making Boss preamp sections out of the CE1, for example. And so that booster, which gives you the ability to isolate the preamps out of a Roland Space Echo or from a CE1, and being able to have that as like its own standalone thing. Like, I think that's a really cool thing. That kind of, again, looks at the broader marketplace, that there's people that are interested in that, and then kind of brings it to an audience that, is going to be interested in Boss pedals and maybe isn't aware of these boutique alternatives or things of that nature. So I think that was a really cool idea.
Right. Oh, well said. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of one of those things where we were like, we don't even have a boost pedal in our lineup, really. Like, we have a huge lineup of pedals, and we're like, well, there's no like standard boost pedal. We should do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, cool. I mean, that would certainly lead into my one of my top 5s is absolutely the C2W, the chorus. So when we released the boost preamp, the first thing I did was like park them next to each other and be like, we did it. We're together. But it's funny how those things can take those stories can take root, and people are like, oh, the key to John Frusciani's tone is the CE1's preamp. That one little thing in the signal chain of a million other things. It's like, that's the key.
I think that's BS, but it's cool. It's cool to be able to isolate.
Right, like that. Like, that's the thing. Those stories. We were all intrinsically attracted to stories. So whether it is or not, it doesn't matter to a certain extent. You're sort of like, oh, like I got it. Now I got it. Now I can have that sound anytime I want. Right.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, talking about limitations on pedals, one of my favorites that I would pick over the CE2W is the Dimension C. And I love the Dimension C. Obviously, it sounds great, but I love the Dimension C for the fact that you have to be limited. Like, you can't spend time fine tuning because it doesn't have any knobs. For those that are listening, you get like 4 push buttons, and you can select one, or you can do, I guess, combinations if you really want to get crazy. But button 1 through 4, and you get to pick your predetermined or preset chorus sound, and that's it. And I love that, because you basically just, you get very limited sounds in a good way, and then you just have to go and play guitar. Like, there's no option paralysis. You just got to play your instrument. And I think one of my biggest frustrations nowadays is that we have not a lot, but we have a good portion of the industry with gigantic boards. And I've been there myself. And more of your time is spent dialing up sounds than it actually is picking strings on the instrument and actually playing guitar. And that's one of my biggest kind of irks about what's going on. So when you come across pedals that are so basic, you just can't spend more than a few minutes, dialing them in. And then you just gotta start playing guitar. I love it. And that's probably why the Dimension C is one of my all-time favorite Boss pedals, is for its limitations.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, if it's good enough for Prince, it must be,
And it had a lot of Boss pedals in series. In the case of Prince, it was like, 15 or something like that.
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah. He loved.
And
One
that
other
brings up
pedal
a whole
that I
other
think
conversation about buffers.
Yeah,
if it's good enough for Prince, then there's another tangent. Sorry, I cut you off, Mason. You go.
No, I think that another pedal that's really cool that I've really been getting into lately from Boss is the VB2. And I have an original one here on my pedal board. But we just did this video with this session legend named Michael Thompson, and he played on a lot of these like 90s powered ballads, from your countrywoman, Celine Dion, in particular. And I understand that she's French Canadian, and that's, it's basically a different world, from British Columbia. But, nevertheless, that Boss vibrato is all over that stuff. And he always has it in the unlatching, selector position. And then I'm watching him, because part of the video is we're interviewing them and we're talking about the kind of like let's say the 10 songs that are most emblematic of their careers. And then as we finish the conversation about each song, they play to the original multi-track with the guitar stem removed. And so he's playing these layers and he's swelling the volume pedal and then stepping on the vibrato in the unlatched position as he swells. So each trail of the delays has this warble of vibrato printed on it. And it was the coolest thing. And I was like, man, this is like, I would never thought to do that. But that was like a great use case for this latching feature, this unlatching feature.
So he'd be doing 2 feet, if I'm hearing you right.
2 feet, yeah.
One
so
foot
you have
on
one on the volume,
one
and then the other
holding
one stepping on the vibrato,
No
just to
way.
print that on the decay of the reverb and the delay trails.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
And he's like, an evangelist of this pedal, and has kind of made his career as far as sort of ambient textural stuff, especially as it relates again to like 90s power ballads. And he's like, this is the one, like this is what I use. And he was using the VB2W, and he was like, yeah, this is better than the one that I had, because he's like, the one that I had like was way noisier. Like this is way quieter, but it sounds 100% the same as the original, And so it was a good endorsement for the Wazacraft. Now I do have the original. I haven't compared it to the Wazacraft, but his word is good enough for me.
It's awesome.
Is that video out, or is that coming up?
No, it'll probably be a few weeks before it's out, but if you're interested in it, I can send you some previews, and you can really see how he's manipulating it, where it's like both feet, at the same time, like this is swelling and this is like holding, at the same time.
That's awesome.
That's so cool. That's
Yeah.
so cool. Yeah.
I'm stressed just hearing about that. Like I find it hard enough just to focus on playing my guitar, let alone using both feet at the same time.
Yeah,
It's,
you have to be sitting. It would be hard to pull off standing, I think.
and you need a robust volume pedal if you're going to do that as well.
Yeah, you would. You
Yeah.
would.
That's
With a big-
very cool.
Big sweep to it. Yeah. Oh, that's
Any
amazing.
any last favorites here, Danny, or anyone else before we finish up the podcast for today?
Oh man, I'm no. Like I'm certainly, like I always say, that the weirdest people that I deal with are the people who have no Boss pedals on their pedal board and who have all Boss pedals on their pedal board. And yes, Prince was weird, but I love it. I love the industry that we're in, and I think variety is the spice of life. So I don't ever want to seem like I'm Mr. Boss only, but there's some slappers there that just have become staples in my pedal board. The BD2, the CE2 very rarely leaves. Although right now I think I have the PH2 on my pedal
Phaser.
board.
That
Yeah.
phaser, the green one?
Yeah. I've been thinking about my pedal board, and while I really love like modulations that are subtle, like the choruses and the vibratos and stuff like that, but I always forget about, well, as soon as I start playing with a band again more, I need more like effects that scare the band a little bit, like the whammy. The whammy is
more
like
extremes.
the all time, like you're goofing around at a practice and you're just like screwing that whammy down. But I was like, what phaser do I have that can go as slow and as deep as possible? So you just like ride that low E and you're just like, yeah. So,
You don't want the underwater sound?
yeah. So PH2
Love
is a sleeper, I think.
Yeah, it is. It is cool. It is cool. One other one that I really love that I don't think gets enough love is the tremolo. The TR2. And I
love
feel
the
like that
TR2.
is so due for a Waza edition. Firstly, many people don't know this. It is one of the few analog tremolos that exists in the marketplace. There are very few analog tremolos that exist. Almost every one of them is digital. And the only drawback I think that I've ever had with a TR2 is that with the depth up high, you can lose some volume. And then there's a lot of mods that address that. You know, people, you know, for the longest time, Keeley had something and Analogman had something. And I think now Exactone does something to them, and they have a process for the through-hole versions versus the surface mount, I believe.
We actually fixed that. We addressed that.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so subsequent versions then have that, but don't have an individual volume control though, do they?
No. I think they just adjusted it slightly. Yeah, just a little up.
Yeah, well, because it's modulating the volume, there may be some difficulty in being able to nail it exactly. Like they maybe increase where the baseline was, but I would still imagine if you're going full depth, you're going to lose some output because otherwise you'd be boosting the signal a ton just to get it to unity. But nevertheless, that is an excellent tremolo and is what I use on all my boards. I think it's still one of the best sounding tremolos out there. And again, I think it's deserving of a Waza edition. It's very, very good.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm very curious to see what the next year looks like for what you guys have got cooking. The things you can't tell us about right now that you're just sitting there like, just you wait. Just wait. I'm excited to see what comes.
Yeah, the CE 101. I'm ready.
Yeah. And I'd like to be very clear. I cannot hint towards anything at all. So we can't do that. We're not going down that road.
No, it's okay. I'm just putting it out there. I'm just putting it out there as a wish list.
Into the ether. Yeah.
Yep.
Certainly. Yeah. But I mean, that's kind of the fun part about my job is that you never truly know. And you know, like Roland and Boss have kind of fought the idea of doing like reissues and stuff like that as well. And the Wazacraft was a way to like, we want to respect the past, but we don't want to do the exact same thing, right? So, yeah, it'd be interesting. TR2 would be cool. I think personally, as a flanger-holic, I'd love to see a Waza flanger eventually. But I am not the guy to blow that.
The BF2.
Oh, grossly. I don't want to say underrated, but the secret is out, and I see the prices starting to climb. Like it's just a great flanger. But you never know.
Yeah,
time will tell.
Could be like in front of me right here. You never know. Yeah, you never know. Yeah.
Well, Danny, thank you so much for joining us today. So much fun having you on the episode. We'll make sure the video, especially of the 5 worst pedal trends, is at least in the bottom section here of the show notes, and people can check that out as well. But thanks for your insight. Thanks for having a chat. This was a lot of fun, and hopefully we can have you on again sometime in the future.
Oh, thanks, guys. Thank you for being so welcoming.
Of course.
Oh, this was a ton of fun. All right, guys.
All right.
We'll keep squeezing into the Miata, head a little further towards Stonetown, and we'll see you guys next week.
All right. Bye. See ya.